So I wanted to start with the Juno mission. Juno arrived at Jupiter in July of last year. So we're going to celebrate several anniversaries tonight, and this is the most recent one. It is in a polar orbit around Jupiter in a very, very eccentric orbit. This is a diagram of its flight in before it went into orbit. Here's Jupiter right here. It passed quite close to Jupiter, and it was intended to do 2 orbits that take 53.5 days to complete, and then on the 3rd of those orbits it was going to do a rocket firing and trim its orbit to only 14 days. And so every 2 weeks we'd have a close flyby of the planet. But there's a problem with the onboard propulsion system, and NASA decided to follow the safe course, which was let's not use that engine again in case something goes horribly wrong with it. And so they've stayed in these 53.5-day orbits. And so instead of every 2 weeks now, it's every a little bit more than a month and a half or so. And they just completed on July 10th their 5th close pass by Jupiter. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. Well, one of the interesting things about Juno is, for all intents and purposes, it is not doing science with its camera. It's got charged particle detectors and plasma wave detectors and magnetometers and infrared spectrometers and all sorts of non-imaging devices. But they decided to put on a camera called Juno Cam, which is intended as a public outreach camera. And so there's websites where members of the general public that are interested can make a case for taking observations of a particular location or feature on Jupiter. And if they succeed, then it gets scheduled into the system. Once the data come back, they're released very quickly, and it's up to the public to do the image processing on the data. And there's actually some people that are really, really good at this. And this is just an example from, I think this was taken back in the mid-May pass, the previous one to this one. So here's what the raw image would look like. Here's what it looks like after someone has spent some toil on their computer with something like Photoshop. So it's a great public outreach instrument. And it's Jupiter as art, I think, is what keeps coming up. Now that they're close to the planet, at closest approach, they're less than about 10,000 kilometers from the cloud tops, and getting phenomenal resolution on the clouds and the patterns in the clouds. But the star of this last pass on July 10th was they were flying directly over the Great Red Spot. And that's probably one of the most famous storms in the solar system, if not the most famous storm. It's been observed in ground-based telescopes since the 1600s, so it's been very long-lived. And it grows and shrinks with time. Right now, it's about 1.3 times the diameter of the Earth. As recently as the days of the Voyager spacecraft, back in the late 1970s, this was about twice the size of what it is now. So, but we've never had such a close pass before. And so this is just all of the data from the sunlit side of this pass. The North Pole, South Pole is hidden down here, and this is a color-enhanced version of this. Closer up view of just the spot itself. And then they've also color balanced it so that it's closer to natural color. And just a phenomenal amount of detail in this. And they actually have the data that with enough work they can get stereo pairs out of this. So they can look at the topography, if you will, of the cloud tops. And the first thing that anybody has said is this is sort of a hole in the Great Red Spot. That's a low spot. As you move outward, the clouds get higher and higher. And this is a very grainy looking processed image, but it shows a very nice rendition of the spot. So I think the message here is this is very hot off the presses right now. So if you're interested in Juno and Jupiter, keep an eye on the web. Just search for Juno Great Red Spot, and you're going to see new versions of processing on these data sets coming out over the not too distant future, I expect. And this was taken back in May, and they're calling this the face on Jupiter, I guess to compete with the face on Mars, but I'm not sure where the nose went to, but anyway, he's obviously a little concerned with the spacecraft zooming by overhead.